Hello, my name is Jane Donnelly. I'm from Atheist Ireland and I'm Human Rights Officer for Atheist Ireland, and I'm going to talk to you about education and human rights. And education is a human right. Not many people actually really realise that, but it is a human right. 2 days ago, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission made recommendations on the Education Admissions to Schools Bill. And the reason they did that is that they're a statutory body and they're legally obliged to do so. They made recommendations to remove the discrimination in Section 7.3 of the Equal Status Act. They also made recommendations to change the Education Act so that the curriculum, the state curriculum, in every school will be delivered in an objective, critical and pluralistic manner. Those are basic human rights principles. So we wait to see what is going to happen with those recommendations. And it's not the first time they've made such recommendations. They had a huge report out in 2011. Before I go into the details of what those recommendations and views mean, I'll just give you an overview of the human rights system. There's a right to education in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as Madeleine pointed out. That has moved on to, we have various treaties that Ireland has ratified, and the Dáil has ratified these treaties. And we also have the European Convention on Human Rights Act. That's a legal act, that's a piece of legislation in our country. The right to education is in the UN Convention of the Rights of the Child. It's also in the UN Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So we have Universal Declaration of Human Rights, we have the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we have the UN Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, we have the European Convention on Human Rights Act, which is one of the very important ones because it's a piece of legislation in our country. And in those three pieces, conventions, the right to education is there, so that every child in the country has a right to receive an education. But it doesn't just stop there. That right obliges the state to ensure that every child has an education that respects their parents' convictions. A proper kind of an education, not just basic education, that they can go on to further education, all those different areas that we recognise as an education, and our national school system into secondary and then into university. The right to education is under Article 28 of the Convention on the Rights of the Child. Under the European Convention, it's Article 2 of Protocol 1, and it's Article 13 of the UN Convention on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. Now, the UN and the European Court, they have connected the right to education with other rights. There's different rights in each one of those conventions. They've connected it with the right to freedom of conscience, religion and belief. Now, it's not just freedom of religion. I know everybody keeps saying freedom of religion. It's freedom of conscience, religion and belief. If you're a secularist, if you're an atheist, if you're a humanist, you come under the beliefs part of that. Your belief, it is a philosophical conviction protected by human rights law. And the European Court have found and said that secularism is a philosophical conviction protected by Article 9 of the European Convention, which is the right to freedom of conscience, religion and belief. So you have this exact same as a secularist, atheist, humanist. In that category, you have exactly the same rights as any religious family, no different. The state is obliged to respect your philosophical conviction as an atheist, as a secularist and a humanist. They've also linked the right to education with the right to privacy. So, as a matter of fact, admission policies breach that right because they ask you what your religion you are. So that is a right. You have the right to privacy. It's linked in with your right to freedom of conscience and your right to education. and you also have the right to freedom of expression. And a major right as well is the right to equality before the law and equal protection of the law without discrimination of any kind. Another right which
right to play music.
The right to play music. Another right, which is a very important right, is the right to an effective remedy. And that is one of the rights that the state lost in the Louise O'Keeffe case at the European Court. And that is a very, very important right for anybody that's interested in the education system, because you have a right to your human rights. You have a right to vindicate your human rights in the education system. And if you cannot get through the courts because there's laws in place, like Section 7.3 of the Equal Status Act and Section 15 of the Education Act, which obliges the Board of Management to uphold the ethos of the patron, those are laws that discriminate against you. And you cannot get an effective remedy in this country when those laws are in place. So that is very, very important for us. In Atheist Ireland, we have produced a document that we call the PACT, which Madeleine just referred to. And it talks about patronage. What the state does in Ireland, it absolves itself of the responsibility to educate and delegates that to private bodies. The European Court has found, we don't care if you do that, they said. You can't, you're still responsible. If you want to deliver the education system to private bodies, you can do that, but you're still responsible. If the human rights of parents and children are breached in that school, you are responsible, because that's what happened with Louise O'Keeffe. Louise O'Keeffe was sexually abused in a national school. It was a denomination, as they call them, they like to call them, national school. The Supreme Court said that the state weren't responsible because the state had ceded control to the interests of private bodies. That's what our Supreme Court said about a child in Ireland that was abused in a national school, a public funded national school. So Louise went to the European Court, and the European Court found that the state were responsible. No matter what they say, they cannot absolve themselves of the responsibility to protect small children from sexual abuse in publicly funded national schools. And they also found that she hadn't got an effective remedy to vindicate her rights through the courts. So they lost on Article 3 of the European Convention, and they lost on Article 13, which is the right to an effective remedy. At the moment, they're trying to wriggle their way out of the findings in that case. And we're on their case, as well as the Irish Human Rights Commission, which had made a submission just last month to the Committee of Ministers in the Council of Europe, and Conor O'Mahony from the University College Cork Child Law Clinic has also made a submission. Atheist Ireland, we've made a submission to the Council of Ministers as well. So those are the main the human rights areas. Now, the other day, 2 days ago, as you can see, the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission have every right, because they're legally obliged to do so, there's the Human Rights Commission Act, to make recommendations to government on this new bill that's coming forward. And they have said that it is a breach of human rights, because we know it's a breach of human rights. We've been at this for years. We can show you the case law at the European Court. We can show you some case law. We can show recommendations at the UN, where the UN and the Council of Europe, under the various treaties, have told Ireland to remove Section 7.3c of the Equal Status Act. They've told them to amend the Education Act so that the curriculum is delivered in an objective, critical and pluralistic manner. They've told the state to stop discriminating against atheists, secularists and religious minorities. They've made recommendations. There are now 8 recommendations from various bodies over the years, and that includes the Council of Europe and the United Nations. And Atheist Ireland, we've been over to Geneva twice when Ireland has been up under the various treaties. A couple of years ago, it was we went up before the Human Rights Committee under the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and we were able to, when we were over there, to talk to the committee members and tell them what was happening on the ground, because the school admissions bill was coming forward, and the state were using this as an excuse. They were saying that they were getting rid of the discrimination. So we were there on the ground and we were able to show them that the discrimination, religious discrimination, wasn't going. It was still staying. It wasn't this new school admissions bill wasn't going to remove religious discrimination in the education system. And they took that on board, and the recommendation was pretty harsh. And again, this year, we were over there again under another of the treaties. And again, we pointed out to the committee over there that this discrimination was going to stay. We told them that we couldn't opt our children out of the curriculum because religion was integrated throughout the school day. And we got another recommendation there. So there are 8 recommendations, and there's a couple from the Council of Europe under the Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities and the European Commission Against Racism and Intolerance. So what I'll do is I will, the best thing I can do is read out maybe what the Irish Human Rights Commission have recommended. And it would be really, really great if anybody here could, you can get those recommendations online. And if, during the next election, if you could hand them to your TDs when they come around and say, look, this is our national human rights body. This is what they're asking. Why won't you change the legislation? In respect of education admissions and the religious exemption clause, the Commission recommends that the Equal Status Act be amended to give effect to the principle that no child should be given preferential access to a publicly funded school on the basis of their religion. The proposed amendment should include an individualised derogation granted by the Minister for Education and Skills, and in the case of a specific school where refusal to admit a student is proven to be essential to maintain the ethos of the school. In respect of admissions policies and promoting inclusivity in all schools, the Commission proposes 2 amendments to the new section 62(6) of the Education Act, which deals with the characteristic spirit and general objectives of the school. The characteristic spirit is ethos. It's in the Education Act as ethos. The first amendment will require all schools to provide knowledge and information in the state-prescribed curriculum in an objective, critical and pluralistic manner that avoids indoctrination outside the specific context of religious instruction and faith formation classes where exemptions apply. So you can see that they're making a recommendation here on what is happening in the general area of the school day, because religion is integrated into the curriculum now under Rule 68 and Section 15, and that is upheld by Section 15 of the Education Act. A second amendment to the new Section 62(6) on admissions policies would require schools to have regard to the values of an inclusive school that at a minimum respects and accommodates diversity across all 9 grounds contained in the equality legislation. So that would include the ground of religion. Additionally, the Commission recommends establishing minimum standards in relation to the nature of exemptions for students who do not want to attend religious instruction in accordance with parenthood choice. So what they're asking there is they're asking for guidelines, statutory guidelines, that would give schools an idea of what an inclusive school should be, and give schools an idea of what to do in areas where there are parents that want to opt out of the religious instruction class and want to opt out of the areas where religion is integrated into the curriculum. Now, of course, with the recommendation here, if the curriculum was delivered in an objective, critical and pluralistic manner, Rule 68 would be gone. It'd have to go. Because Rule 68, you can't, it's not objective. It's just not objective. Rule 68 would be gone if you put that into the Education Act. The integrated curriculum, religious integrated curriculum, would be gone if you put that section into the Education Act. There's no doubt about it. And also, if they followed, the government removed section 73C, you would have had access to the school without religious discrimination. So those are recommendations that could drastically change the discrimination that non-religious and religious minorities suffer in the Irish education system. And they're actually really worth looking at. And it's something to hand to potential TDs when they come around, that you can say that here is a statutory body, here is the Irish Human Rights and Equality Commission. These are recommendations from that body. They're here to do a job. You put them there to do a job, and that was to uphold human rights, to promote human rights, and to fight for our human rights. Please do that. Thank you.